Hey everyone, welcome back to Crypto Cash. Thank you so much again for joining me here. I hope you're having a fantastic day. Feels weird to say that because I feel like I'm being sarcastic when I say it, right? Mainly because we saw the largest crypto dump probably ever, and we're going to talk about some important things here. Not only just the fact that I mentioned that, we had some important things to watch out for, be very careful with this Trump and dump, talking about China tariffs. It ended up getting really out of hand really fast. Like most altcoins ended up dropping or dumping between 20 to 80% corrections. And we're talking $5.6 billion was sold off in like 15 minutes. And then on top of that, we had the largest amount of liquidation in history. We saw almost $20 billion in liquidation in just this one event versus 1.2 for COVID or 1.6 for FTX. So people are feeling the pain. It sucks really bad. And I'm sorry if you got caught in that mess. Thankfully, we were short heavy on pretty much everything. We didn't take a lot of shorts yesterday because it looked too crazy. But on the same accord, we got where we needed to. Welcome aboard to a lot of community members here. Of course, I just want to say thank you again for your vote of confidence, always liking the videos, enabling alerts, and obviously communicating down below in the comments definitely helps grow the channel. We got over 4,000 views from yesterday. That was really nice to be able to have that option there. There we go, 4,000 views. So pretty big deal for me, of course. So thanks again for that. And we're going to take a look here, of course, at the back-end liquidation data, specifically some order block information, touch on this double top for the macro structure. We're going to be focusing more so on larger timeframes, mainly because we need to know key level supports and resistances. We touched on that yesterday, but we're going to touch on it again today, of course, just to kind of reaffirm some larger stuff and just kind of touch on the more recent structure too, because there could be some opportunities in the near future. Okay, so those are all things we're going to look at, but furthermore, kind of see if there's any outliers here. Are there altcoins that are worth taking trades with right now? That's kind of the question. So stick around. We got a good one today. Let's take a look. All right, folks, before we jump in the juicy backend data here, I want to touch on a couple of important things here. First of all, we already kind of highlighted some of these relevant posts on Twitter, of course, some things that are kind of important to recognize. Obviously, if you haven't followed me on Twitter, feel free to do so. Love to have you along. But what I want to talk about is more so in our Discord. I have this in our Discord specifically just because we like to have a lot of fun in here, right? And part of that fun is just kind of making jest on other influencers because none of us are perfect, of course, but I think it's hilarious. So this is our daily dumbass here. Crypto Rover, you made the roll there. Well done. This is why Ethereum will go parabolic. Apparently, that applies to the downside too. All right, so awesome stuff. Feel free to post them in there. Another funny meme here as well. I'm considering putting this as a thumbnail here soon on my videos is that your technical analysis is no match against my tweets. Pretty much Trump destroyed the entire market yesterday. It wasn't him. Market makers obviously took the plunge. I think there was definitely some insider trading going on. And obviously everybody who had billions of dollars was able to buy those dips. I mean, what? Chainlink or so what was it? There's a few of them that were down like the 10 to 15 cent range when they normally average at like $3 or $4. It is insane. Like SUI went down to 50 cents or something stupid. So anyways, we're gonna look at some important stuff really quickly, just to kind of throw it out there too, because I get a lot of questions about this. Yes, our premium trades worked out very well. We got 94% on our Bitcoin short. We also scavenged 72% from SUI. Could have got more of that honestly in hindsight. Solana 66%, and then there was also AVAX 109%. So those are pretty safe trades. Honestly, they're 10 to 20x leverage trades. I usually lean more towards what is it? I usually like to do more like 5x leverage, but lately we've been increasing leverage and lowering our position size because we've been working within these tighter margins. So honestly, with the exception of yesterday, you want to play safer trades and keep your margins tighter so that we are not getting super outrageous with it. Last but not least too, and I don't know if you can see in the banner down below, but I kind of had some fun with this. It's no longer an Uptober sale. We have a Dumptober sale. So that's all available for you in our Discord if you want to consider joining. Dumptober sale, full-fledged there, right? Up to 30% off discount. Anyways, okay, so those are that. Let's go ahead and talk about kind of the important, super normal stuff here. This isn't like normal by any stretch as far as the price action, but for the most part, the order blocks are telling us that we have some heavy buy orders at 111,000 and 110,000. So there's two big chunks there that haven't gotten filled yet. Obviously, that can change probably in just a few seconds, but for the most part, we're seeing a lot more buying pressure there below the price, kind of spread out further down, but tighter sell orders. So there's a lot of selling pressure at about the 112.3. So that's just kind of locally there. From a macro structure, though, I've talked about this for quite a few days. Just generally speaking, on the weekly time frame, we have a very similar structure here to our previous double top. So I'm not proposing we're going to see a significant correction, even though we already saw that kind of. But our last downtrend was about 32% from the high of about 110K to the low of about 75K, right? So hypothetically, you look at the same scenario here, that puts us somewhere in the 90K range. Just as a rough estimate, strictly hypothetical, but the truth is we're still above a lot of moving averages. There's nothing here really telling us from a macro perspective that we're in terrible shape. Oddly enough, even after this horrible week so far, we're still maintaining above majority of moving averages and not looking all that terrible. So I know it seems kind of weird to say, but the larger timeframes are not in that tough a shape. What is in bad shape here is, well, first of all, ETH dominance. Obviously, ETH is getting hit pretty hard. And this is just a reflection generally of where all the markets kind of, where the money's at for the most part. Tons of money flowed into Bitcoin, or to keep it simple, Bitcoin dominance increased mainly because altcoin dominance went down so fast, right? And as per usual, you see the price of most money selling out of Bitcoin going into stablecoin, and then typically money coming away from altcoins going into stablecoin. The key takeaway here is that Bitcoin dominance is back in the 60% range, and that's really bad for altcoins. So it doesn't necessarily mean you shouldn't take any longs right now. It just implies that we're probably not at our bottom yet. And that's kind of just the concept. After looking at this day in and day out for years, I can tell you that this is usually not a good situation to be like FOMOing into longs. And I get the concept of buying a dip and awesome stuff if you got in. Some people got into SUI at like between the $1 to $150 range, which is awesome. Like I was actually not at my desk when this happened, out of office essentially, when everything was going to hell, right? And in hindsight, I wish I could have bought some of those dips, of course. So no harm, no foul there if you did. That's a different story for a spot bag perspective. But the general consensus is that from a leverage play consideration, taking some longs right now may not be the best call, even though we're probably likely going to see a slight slow recovery. It's just it's dangerous waters right now, and I recommend this too. In most cases, I talk to my community about this. Make sure that you take some time away from the charts, spend some time with your family, your friends, your loved ones, pet your dogs, your animals, whatever. Make sure that you are doing being the best for you and not letting this get the best of you. If you had cross margin leverage trades open, then I'm so sorry to hear that. That's a significant bummer. All the more reason to never use cross leverage, which is what I teach to my community. Anyways, looking at liquidation here, the important thing to recognize is just that we are in a situation where there's way more liquidation above the price than below. Obviously, we know that. We can obviously see here that there's definitely high leverage to the downside for people buying these dips, right? So my advice to you is to consider securing some profits. I don't think we're going to go parabolic to the upside anytime soon. I mean, if so, it'd be manipulation again, as per usual. So I guess I wouldn't be that surprised. But generally speaking, when you have this far of a sell-off or this strong of a sell-off, it usually takes a while for it to recover, okay? So I wouldn't expect sunshine or rainbows anytime soon. A good analogy I like to have that I wouldn't say never, I haven't said this in a while, and if you've been watching me for a while, you'll know. Feel free to comment below if you heard this before. But if you imagine like falling down a flight of stairs, right? You're probably going to break some bones. You're going to be in a wheelchair for a while. It's going to be difficult to get up and run again, right? That's how the price is right now. It literally fell down a flight of stairs. As compared to just tripping on the bottom stair, maybe scuffing your knee or twisting your ankle, you're going to be back on track in a short while, right? That's what happens with a small sell-off. A large sell-off is different. Those are broken bones, and we can't recover from that quick, right? So just try not to be naive that we're going to be back on track, and try not to be one of these idiots here that tells us that we're going to go to maybe 10,000 for XRP, right? Come on now. Anyways, let's go ahead and focus on the backend data here. Let's quickly look at, first of all, crypto market fear and greed index just before we do that. And I just want to touch on this here. This is a fearish type of market now, right? The fear is struck into the bones of many traders now. So people are probably a little gun shy. I don't blame you. You probably don't even have any dry powder left, right? But for the most part, fear is generally the better time to buy, right? So I'm not proposing you get out and go crazy, but maybe add a little bit to some of your spot bags, of course, and just consider the long-term play here. Most market makers like to do these big old flushes and then essentially get it back to where they want it to. They're making money in either direction, but they're going to make a lot more money if they start to increase the price because no one else is buying and they're the only ones doing so. So keep in mind, fear is generally the best time to buy. That's kind of the concept there. But as per usual, when we see our we're right there at one point, we're just just barely above 1.5 trillion. And that's kind of the cutoff for me, kind of just letting me know that we're in a scary situation if we're below that level. Not like scary, like, oh my gosh, we got to sell everything, but the likelihood of, a bull run or some people say alt season, for example, like I think that the odds of that happening are pretty low. Now, even though I cover altcoin season index pretty much daily, I'm not a proponent for thinking that everything's going to go to the moon, right? I really think that we're going to have specific outliers doing well and other ones that aren't going to do poorly, okay? That's just the easy way to understand it. So I wouldn't just get too crazy. I would say stick to the top 100. Those are probably the better coins to consider investing in. All right, so let's go ahead and get ourselves a little refresh here just to be safe and take a look at Bitcoin charts, kind of see what the backend data is kind of telling us here. So as we can see, all these long liquidations are swept at almost as low as 110,000. Okay, there's some new longs at about 105 to 103, so we can see some leverage there. But for the most part, we're in a fearish type of situation here. There's way more shorts than longs, and we're going to need to see some high volume to be able to break through any of these local resistances, which we'll identify here shortly. Now, what we want to look at, though, of course, with this scenario is that when we see top traders, they're kind of plateauing. This is a weekend. This is very common, but their margin is high, basically implying that they bought a lot of these dips here. So I don't love to see that, but I also recognize that, it's just one of those situations that's par for the course. We're going to see more whale activity when these things happen, but we can see true retail traders, essentially. These are the $10,000 to $100,000 position sizes. These came down hard. These are the ones that got hit the hardest yesterday with that liquidation sweep. Now, when we take here a look at the open interest, I have kind of some larger timeframes here I want to kind of pull up. I like to look at the 3-month. That's how I did it with my playout charts on Twitter, Telegram, and Discord earlier for my altcoins. And I just want to kind of bring this to your attention and kind of see we are looking at roughly 114 is the closest area, but there's some open interest throughout the current price range. So this isn't super indicative. This doesn't tell us too much. The key takeaway here is that we've got way more open interest above the price than below. And this is a weekend. We shouldn't expect any kind of phenomenal movements here unless Trump starts tweeting again. And if we look here, we got 40 billion liquidation short delta, basically telling us there's way more shorts than longs right now. So to expect a short squeeze is a pretty unrealistic situation. Now, it doesn't mean you can't still take a long from the current price point on Bitcoin to the local high, whatever that is. We're going to look at that and see if there is one. But for the most part, you want to be very cautious in taking longs, right? Outside of spot bags, you want to be kind of careful. So a simple way to understand it is there's not a ton of liquidation here locally. We can see 108, 107, and 105 are just little tiny, well, I wouldn't say they're tiny chunks. They're each one of them are about $3 to $5 billion, but still, you can see 108, 107, and 105. I'm just rounding down for you. So those are kind of some areas there to think about if the price were to pull back. We do have a slight ascending trend here. This is nothing to write home about, but it is a higher low pattern nonetheless. It's kind of ridiculous, honestly, if you ask me, but it is what it is. We take a look at the daily time frame too. We can see we're under 50 on the RSI, all right? Stochastic swinging down, MACD diverging. These are generally signs you don't want to take a long into. Once more, scalping trades, different stories altogether, but for the most part here, that's kind of what we're looking at. Now, when we look at the smaller time frames, we can see our price moving average range percentile. We got a lot of alerts there, this big green bar, basically letting us know we have a ridiculous amount of price action versus that of the amount of volume. So it really just tells us that we're in a significant scenario right now where the price is magnificently oversold. And generally speaking, you will see prices recover because of that. So I'm not proposing we're going to go up or super high, but I do think locally here, maybe to our local high, we might be able to see that. And in order to identify our local high, we really got to zoom really far in and see once more. This is more so like, day trading versus swing trading. So take this with a grain of salt, but for the most part, we do see our local high here is about 112.6. If we were to establish a higher high above that, and a higher low, then that would be a better consideration for a long. Between now and then, though, for the most part, there's not really much that you can see here that tells us outside of our extremes that we're due to continue higher. So take a long with extreme prejudice and make sure that you are just watching it super close if you do that. I'm not recommending you do that, though. Keep that in mind. In fact, the inverse also applies here too. If you consider a short, that's also a bad idea based on the simple fact that everything is so overextended that we shouldn't go down much lower unless, of course, some kind of fundamental catalyst occurs. So we're kind of stuck between a rock and a hard place. Is that the kind of trade you like to take? I don't know. Me personally, generally not. So anyways, why don't you comment below, let me know what is your position on Bitcoin. Did you get in on that little candle wick down? Or are you considering shorting to some of those local supports. Just really quick, just to touch on this too. Some of the support levels for us here, just based on daily candlestick closures, is about 108,000, and then second to that, 109,000. So those are kind of our two key level supports. I forgot to identify that with you, just so you kind of understand that little channel there based on local lows. Those are the two areas in which we should see some support if the price were to continue to retest those ranges. All right, folks, let's take a look at some altcoins next. All right, folks, let's take a quick look here at Ethereum. And just so you know, we're going to be doing comparative analysis on each one of these altcoins. Kind of just a quick side-by-side on how Bitcoin looks versus the specific altcoin, mainly to get perspective on, just if it's worth taking a trade or not. My just general recommendation right now is to not trade. Just consider waiting for 48 to 72 hours. That's the best strategy. I mentioned that to my community earlier. The best trade right now is no trade, and you'll be happy later that you did that. Obviously, spot bags are different stories. I'm mostly referring to leverage when I say that. Okay, so keep your leverage low and your position size low, and you'll probably be a lot more safe right now. Okay, and no cross margin for the love of good, all that is good and holy. Right? no cross margin. I know a lot of folks who used cross margin recently got absolutely demolished. A lot of folks from FTX, from that previous collapse, learned their lesson, and unfortunately that's just the way it goes. Anyways, the whole point of this is that we can see 3,700. This is from a 3-month macro perspective on open interest, is that last little area of support below the price. It also implies that there's potential that we see that level too, especially with 45 billion in liquidation short delta. No, sorry, that's 40 billion. Still a lot. There's way more shorts than longs right now. So you're going against the grain if you're taking a long. Not to say that you couldn't still scalp or perhaps take a tight trade to the local resistance, but it's just not a bad idea. Good news is if you're considering a long, most all liquidation to the downside has been swept. So hypothetically, there's really not a lot of opposition there. So if we look at the daily time frame though, we can see we've broken our, sort of, let's double check this here. We're tentatively testing our descending trend here. Okay, so I'm just going to keep that on the chart just to kind of give us perspective. This could be a descending broadening wedge here. A lot of times these do work themselves into a breakout. Bitcoin had the same thing here when it ranged in the 60 to 70K range late last year, right? And just a really big breakout from there. But generally speaking, when you see these broadening wedges, you will experience a continuation higher under the impression we don't lose this descending trend. Okay, so that's generally a positive sign, but you don't want to attach yourself to that because of the simple fact that everything else is going to be truly bearish, right? Now, when we look at the macro from this from this time frame here, this is a daily time frame, we can see we're getting close to our overextended state. Where once we hit 30 on the RSI, usually we're going to see a reversal. We saw that last time as well, where we bounced here off our 9 on TD sequential. The problem is we're only about 4 or 5 days in this continuation. We could very well see a lot more. So it'd be best to presume the price is going to go down lower, and I would propose that you recommend. I would propose being safe. Safer than sorry here, and either not trading, or B, if you're going to take it long, extreme caution. Okay, try not to be a naive person and think we're just going to go straight up from here because we went so far down. Right, it can go lower. So, anyways, the whole concept here, if we look at the 4-hour time frame, there's nothing that's bullish whatsoever. We do have, obviously, this is an indicator that tells us we should see a reversal soon, and it's a very tentative reversal. Keep in mind, this is a weekend, folks. You don't really see strong continuation patterns on weekends, but from an RSI perspective, we can see here that we're maxed out down as low as 20. Generally speaking, when you see that happen, the price can recover. So look at this here, though. Here's a good example. The last time we saw the RSI under 20, we saw the price action inevitably recover. Okay. However, if you look at the time prior to that, it went sideways and then down. So we could very well still be going sideways and down, okay? So please understand, it's not a perfect situation, but based on this massive overextension, if you can see our price moving average range percentile, we got that big green bar up here. That kind of lets us know that we saw some super selling pressure, and that's it's really common for the price action to kind of recover from there. Okay, it really just depends on the circumstance, but that's kind of where we're at there. Anyways, it's not a fantastic situation. That's a simple way to understand it. So try not to, there's no need to sugarcoat this. Ethereum is not going parabolic. It already did to the downside. Anyways, let's take a look at the next altcoin. All right, folks, let's jump into the Solana chart and kind of see. Let's start with a side-by-side comparison. This is the hourly time frame. Solana's on the right, Bitcoin's on the left, and I don't know if you can kind of see this here, but we are seeing lower lows and lower highs for Bitcoin and parallel lows and lower highs for Solana. So what the simple way to understand that is that Solana is bottoming out nicely, but it's also having difficulty creating higher lows here, where so far Bitcoin may actually be starting a new higher low. So that's not really something that you want to take home with and write about, but I can tell you that in the overall sense here, that's not a fantastic coupling to Bitcoin. It's showing weakness. In other words, it keeps retesting its low where Bitcoin's trying to retest its high. Okay, and that's not a good sign. But taking a look here, of course, at Solana back-end data here, this is the last 1 month of open interest. That's pretty much irrelevant. Doesn't help us too much at all. We're looking at 10 billion in liquidation short delta, super high to the downside, and all liquidation is fully swept here back as far as 1 month. So there's nothing really telling us that we're in really good shape here with Solana, right? I mean, none of the backend data is going to really tell us any coins are looking good right now. So there's that. But for the most part, it's a pretty terrible backend look here. So taking a look at the daily, we are seeing some overextensions, but everything's fully bearish. There's not a whole heck of a lot here for Solana to really tell us that we are in good shape to consider a long. Not even the hourly time frame reflects that. 4 hour, of course, as per usual, we touched on this with Ethereum as well. If you saw that, we are seeing this overextension closer to 30 on the RSI. Now, the last time we saw this, we saw bullish divergence and the price action recovered quite nicely. Okay, so I'm not proposing we're going to see this again, but I can tell you though that in general, when we see this significant amount of price moving average range percentile overextension, as well as a bounce off of 30 on the RSI, it is generally a recipe for recovery. But it's going to require Bitcoin to go sideways and up in order for that to happen. So just know if you were to consider a long right now, it is relatively on the risky side because we did definitely lose our support at that 195 to 200 range. So I don't love the concept here. I recommend highly waiting the weekend out before you consider trading this coin. There's just not a lot of awesome stuff here. Okay, so those are my thoughts. I hope I'm wrong. The price goes up and you make some money on it. All right, thanks again. Let's take a look here next at SUI. All right, folks, let's take a quick look here at SUI, see what's going on. And wow, this is absolutely abysmal. Not great. If you see this, it's almost comical. I'm sorry to laugh, but look at this. 57 cents, probably just under, with candle wick down. Like, that is an insane candle, right? That candle wick wicked 80% of the way down. So anybody with cross margin leverage or isolated, of course, got fully liquidated there, but primarily the cross leverage folks got destroyed. So I don't want to say that I don't feel sorry for them, but you shouldn't be using cross leverage because it's bad because it saves your trades by pulling from your overall margin. But once you run out of margin, curtain call, right? You're totally toast. So this was orchestrated by market makers. Absolutely. It sucks 110%, but make sure you learn from it if you did experience some kind of significant loss. Again, we were heavy on shorts, been talking about it for a week now, that it's important to not get too crazy with your trades. And obviously, if you took a look here, you'll see caution. Altcoin season canceled. It's happening again. Will it hold? Momentum shift. This is bad. Trump and dump. Like, there's reasons why the price is looking pretty poor. Granted, nobody saw this happening, right? You could not forecast this type of sell-off, but you can, be safer than sorry and make sure you're using low leverage and or not taking longs in a descending trend. That's the easy way to understand it. Anyways, definitely not I told you so, but it's also I recommend you pay more attention and maybe stop being kind of like one of those persons that just follows you the other idiots online, because that doesn't really help anybody. It certainly doesn't help you because most people aren't going to take ownership of your trades because you have to do that. All right. Anyway, sorry, sidebar there. So take a look here quickly, side to side here, comparison with SUI and Bitcoin. Pretty similar in a lot of ways. SUI is looking better than Solana as far as like the side-by-side comparison. It is establishing higher lows so far. Still very early to tell. Volume is dropping. It's a weekend. These are not really awesome trading conditions, but SUI looks marginally better than Solana does on the lower time frame compared to Bitcoin. Now let's look at the back end here and recognize we got significant gaps here, which basically tells us we're going to have some CME gaps. I did forget to cover that earlier in the video. I'll make sure to cover that again tomorrow, but when it comes to gaps here, obviously the SUI isn't traded on CME futures, but generally speaking, you'll see gaps like this occur that will get filled because of the simple fact that the price action moves so fast on lower timeframes that it literally jumped. In fact, you can see that reflected on a lot of liquidation on other charts. I think XRP has this, where you can see the actual price action is it basically gapped out, and all of the liquidation got kind of ignored. Even though it still got liquidated, the charts couldn't pick it up because it moved so fast. And that's just, those are anomalies that we see happen, and that they shouldn't be happening, but it did. Okay, so suffice to say, we're at about 600 million down from 1 billion in liquidation short delta. And if we look at our liquidation, every single last ounce of liquidation is fully swept. No surprise there. Let's look at the 3-day time frame. No, let's go with the weekly, see if there's anything that we can identify here and kind of look at this here. So we had this ascending trend here, of course, that is tentatively broken. We're likely to close below that on the weekly, unless we can reclaim $3 in the next 24 hours. We've broken our short-term, sorry, actually our macro ascending trend. Okay, so that's not a good sign. So the weekly does look pretty darn terrible. We can see everything's breaking bearish there. 3-day time frame is probably going to reflect the same, exactly the same. I mean, every single time frame you look at on this coin, and most coins, are going to look pretty bad. There's no other way around it. So the best way to anticipate this is to wait for the price to kind of normalize in its range to see what happens next. And you need time to allow that to happen. And it does require patience. And I know patience is probably the only strength that traders do not have. Most traders, right? It's taken me a long time to develop it. I wasn't always the most patient, but I can tell you after 20 years, situations like this just make me be like, turn up my nose, and I'm just going to walk away and not even bother with it. I'm only making these videos for you, not because I want to try to find a good trade, because there are no good trades right now. That's the best way to understand it. So the concept here is that there's nothing good about this coin right now. We can identify some key levels and just recognize that local resistance here, our previous high is at 311. That really doesn't help us too much because I highly doubt we're going to reclaim 311 anytime soon. We have our previous low at about 240. Hypothetically, that's our support there, with the price action kind of wicking down there previously, or closing on the daily, if I recall correctly, right? Oh no, it was actually 244. Okay, so we're kind of in a range right now. It's either 245 as a round number or 310 as a round number above the price. Those are two areas of support and resistance we want to focus on and kind of see. Between now and then, less is more, okay? Please understand that. All right, so let's go ahead and move on to XRP. Taking a look at XRP, we can recognize this is also a trashy chart. We came down as low as 77 cents. So I'm sure some people were pretty happy and stoked about that. I'm willing to guess that people like this, maybe these ones here, these guys are the ones that are excited about these trades. Awesome. Okay, so let's take a look here. I'm sorry, my sarcasm is thick today. I apologize. So let's take a look, of course, at the daily time frame. And oh wait, you know what? Let's just compare it first here. Take a look on the right-hand side, XRP and the lower time frames. It is looking a lot better than Bitcoin. Okay, so all fun aside, we are seeing a pretty awesome little situation here for XRP. More likely than not, going to break out here and push a little bit higher, because you can see a local high here at about 248 has been pushing, and we're seeing a bit of a it's an ugly one, but you can kind of see somewhat of a cup and handle. All right. Now, once more, you don't take trades based on these patterns alone, right? But generally speaking, when you see an area retested multiple times, it's more likely to break out, right? So there is that. This is like the one little outlier here that we can see that looks better than Bitcoin. So under the impression Bitcoin doesn't pull back super hard, XRP could progress a little bit higher. Now, I want to emphasize the word a little bit, because we got our previous high range, which was supposed to work as a support, by the way, at 255. So the margins are tight there if you're going to consider a long, just because we have that previous high, should have worked as a new low. Now it's going to be a new resistance for us. So that's something to pay attention to. But when we look at the back end data here, there's nothing really amazing, right? We can see significant gap down. We can see 3 billion in short liquidation delta, and every single ounce of liquidation has been fully swept. So not a whole heck of a lot to really talk about or write home about. So overall, minus overextensions here, the lower time frames, if any of these coins right now has a good chance, XRP is the only one that has a tight margin for success if Bitcoin can stay where it's at. But overall, for the most part, there's not a lot of good trading going on. I highly recommend you kind of just chill out and relax on the sidelines. We'll see if there's any new opportunities tomorrow, Monday, Tuesday, etc. But between now and then, take it easy on the sidelines, and I maybe consider a tight long on this coin here up into that local resistance. But it's going to be a high risk trade by all means, which I don't typically like to do very often. So anyways, all that being said, every single trade right now is high risk. Just remember that, and I hope you have a fantastic rest of your day. Thanks so much for being an amazing part of my life. Like, subscribe, follow. We'll see you the next one. Take care out there.